It seems that all we hear about when it comes to the Big 12 this year is Texas, 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 and I get it. They're arguably the biggest brand in college football, and it does seem that they're poised to potentially have a big year. But there hasn't been a ton of chatter about Oklahoma and Brent Venables heading into year 2, and at this stage, I'd be willing to bet that's exactly how he wants it. Now, he wants that chip on the shoulder mentality. He wants to be able to circle the wagons, pun intended, and take on the moniker of it's us against the world. And at least to this point, seems like it's going to be pretty easy to emphasize that to his players. Now, while the Sooners are somewhat of a question mark this year, when you actually dive into the roster a little bit, there's an opportunity for OU to be somewhat dangerous. Now, we know QB1 Dillon Gabriel has some witch in him. He's got to stay healthy. Marvin Mims may be gone, but Jaleel Farouk and Drake Stoops, a.k.a. Haru the Great White Ninja, are back. And with Andale Anthony coming in from Michigan and Austin Stogner at tight end, it could be a pretty formidable combo as well. Now, the biggest question to me when I look at him is how the offensive line's going to gel. And Stanford tackle transfer Walter Rouse could be the bookend tackle that we're used to seeing in Norman. Match him with a legit center in Andrew Rame, and you got a pretty good 1-2 punch there as well with some other guys returning. Now, I am worried about their depth up front on the offensive line, but only time will tell if that's going to fall into place. Now, defensively last year, if we're going to be honest, they just didn't have the cats. Some pieces were nice, like Danny Stutzman, and he returns, as well as Jordan Kelly and Isaiah Coe in the middle on the defensive line. But there's a reason the Sooners finished dead last in pass defense in the Big 12 and gave up more first downs than any team on the planet. But I'd be willing to bet that that unit's going to be much different thanks to the transfer portal. And you can believe Brent Venables isn't having any more of having a soft defense. He wants his team to be nasty. He wants them to be physical. And he has the dudes to be able to go line up and kick somebody's ass a little bit on defense. But perhaps the most useful tool of all is that they can actually be sneaky this year. Now, Oklahoma rarely has that ability because we know who they really are and how big that brand is, and it doesn't take much to get them going. So let's see if the boys from Norman can put their name back in the big lights this year, because they could very well be a snake in the grass in the national landscape of college football. You know how you can be prepared? We all know shopping for a car is stressful, right? It's one of the biggest purchases you're going to make. But with CarZing, buying a new car can be a whole heck of a lot stressful because you can be prepared. You know what it is, you're sports fans out there? It's a scouting report for buying a car. You go into the game with a game plan. You know what to expect. You go into the dealership and spend the entire day in there with a crowd. Typically, it's stressful, and you have the potential to not even find the right car. But with CarZing, that's CARZING, it completely changes the way you buy a car. David, we talk about it every time we talk about CarZing. I like being prepared. All right, you can call it OCD, you can call it OC, you can call it ABCD, EFG. I don't care, but I like being prepared.
I like being prepared too. I wouldn't call it ABC, but
ipso facto.
Well, ipso facto. Be prepared when you get your car.
Flaming Dragon, you just bought a whip.
I did. It's great. And I mean, the thing about it is I always go back to this. Even if you're not comfortable about it, maybe you're not even in the market. Go peek around a little bit.
Yeah.
Go walk by a window shop a little bit.
You can instantly pre-qualify online without it affecting your credit score. You can get instant financing details, what your monthly payment would be, term payment, and APR, and you can find the right car at an ideal budget. So visit carzing.com, CARZING.com / booster today to skip the guesswork and find the best deals near you. That's carzing.com /booster. Go check them out. It's a really good product. But David, looking at Oklahoma, and not that nobody's talking about him, and Brent Venables did make some waves yesterday. I don't know if you saw where he said
I did see a little bit.
He's like, it's one thing to go 6-7 and get blown out by Middle Tennessee and
shots at Miami
45-3.
I wouldn't be doing that.
I wouldn't be doing that either. But the defense is going to get turned around with Venables there. And when you add the pieces, and if you look at Oklahoma last year, when you don't have the personnel, especially in the back end, I mean, they were getting ran by in the secondary. It seemed that once you broke that front seven, you broke the box. There was a lot of big runs that hit. You look at the first downs given up. But now that you bring in the Wake Forest transfer, you bring in guys that you feel like have not only added solid pieces of that starting 11, but depth, you can run more man and feel good about it. You can blitz more and feel good about it because you don't feel like you're going to get your pants pulled down. You can run stunt more. because you feel like a safety can come up and make a play. So I expect the defense to take a big step. Gabriel has to stay healthy. I like the pieces they have on offense. Jaleel Farouk's a kid that I've watched since he was in high school. I know how talented he is. When you look at Oklahoma, how under the radar do you think this team is?
Well, we talked about it a little bit yesterday. They are certainly flying under the radar. That's without a doubt. But everything you said is correct. Plus, you add in the fact that a lot of times these offensive-centric coaches can strike hot early on, year one, year two. We see that all the time. The defensive-centric coaches, it does take a little bit longer. You know, I mean, Nick Saban struggled that first year at Alabama. We saw Kirby Smart. It took him a couple years at Georgia. So with Brent Venables entering year two, and it's, you know, interesting enough, he's taking shots at Miami because I think the three coaches for me entering year two that are most exciting to watch, or I want to see what's going to happen, is Lincoln Riley, Brent Venables, and then Mario Cristobal at Miami, like we were talking about. So, you know, when you look at last season, what really sticks out are those two blowout losses. Getting blanked 49-0 against your biggest rival at Texas, not a good look. Then you have a 31-point loss to TCU, who came out of nowhere. That's what sticks out in people's mind. But if you look at the last four losses of the season, that's Baylor, West Virginia, Texas Tech, and then the bowl game at Florida State. All of those losses are by 3 points. Okay. Now look at the schedule this year. I'm just going to rattle this off quickly. Arkansas State, SMU, Tulsa, Cincinnati, Iowa State. You get the Red River Shootout, a neutral site against Texas. Central Florida, Kansas. You go to Oklahoma State with Bedlam, West Virginia, BYU, and then TCU. There's no Kansas State on there.
That's pretty favorable, man.
There's no Texas Tech on there. Like, that's as good of a schedule as you can ask for with your last year in the Big 12 if you're Oklahoma.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So I'm looking around like, man, I think, maybe we were shorting Oklahoma a little bit on their season win totals when we did the overs and unders because, they could enter the Texas game at 5-0 right there. And I'm just telling you, if you love college football, if you're listening and you love college football, do not miss the Bedlam rivalry this year.
Yeah.
This could be the last installment that we see of Oklahoma and Oklahoma State for maybe 2 decades. That is going to be an incredible football game.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I'm glad you brought up the schedule. Flaming, number one, I want you to talk about that chip on the shoulder mentality going into fall camp, and especially how a defensive coach, and we know Brent Venables is a get after your ass. Let's fly around. Let's physical practices. This is who we're going to be, and that's a great kind of balance going into the Southeastern Conference too, which we know is a rough and tumble conference. But the second thing is looking at this schedule. You brought up Texas. There's a really good chance. I mean, SMU, no Tanner Mordecai. He's gone to Wisconsin. Not saying they're not going to be good.
No game's going to be easy.
No game's going to be easy. But at Tulsa, winnable. At Cincinnati, I believe in the Snuffleupagus more than I do in Satterfield there at Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. Iowa State at home. The Texas game, then you get UCF at home. I'm looking at Texas, at Kansas, at Oklahoma State, and then the last two at BYU, which Keaton Slovis will probably be hurt by then. I don't wish anybody getting hurt, but I mean, that's just who he is. And then TCU at home. I mean, if you can go 4-1 or even 3-2 in that 5-game slate, you can mess around and go 10-2 this year.
I mean, we're talking about Oklahoma. So we're not talking about Kansas. And I don't know how.
Well, don't sleep on Kansas.
I don't know. I'm talking about just when it comes to a team that should have a chip on their shoulder. It's Oklahoma. You're one of the best and biggest in the Big 12. You've been like that. I don't know how Oklahoma's flying under the radar.
Who's talking about them?
Who's not talking about them? Everyone's talking about Texas and Oklahoma.
Everybody's
one, because they're moving conferences.
Texas.
One, because they're moving conferences.
That's not true.
And any two teams that get talked when it comes to the Big 12 is Texas and Oklahoma. Hell, Oklahoma might even get being talked more because of how bad they played last year.
Well, they did have a losing record last year.
For sure. You never see that from Oklahoma. But we know what Venables is going to do. Hell, you can't be worse on defense. You gave up 30 points a game. You have Dylan Gabriel, who's, my opinion, would be good and maybe put a little money on for the dark horse of the Heisman. It's the way he plays, the arm he has and the talent he has in the pocket. But I don't think Oklahoma, one, is not walking in with a chip on their shoulder. They should. You're one of the best and biggest teams in the conference, even before you go to the SEC. And I think Oklahoma, at this point, you can't have a worse year than last year. You're automatically going to be better. No Kansas State, no Texas Tech. You can start 5-0 walking into Texas. And I think right now, with the defense that you got, right, with the transfer, the linebacker who led the Big 12 in tackles, you got another linebacker from Indiana who was a All-American freshman who's going to be an absolute dog. Venables is going to fix it, but people are talking about Oklahoma. I haven't heard anybody talk about Kansas State.
I've watched Big 12 Media Days every single day.
I have too.
Every single day. I have heard probably 10 minutes on Oklahoma. You know what I hear? I hear Sonny Dykes and TCU. I hear Texas. Hell, now when you hear about Texas, they're talking about Texas A&M. I'm not hearing a ton of Oklahoma. I have heard a bunch of Kansas State. Will Howard right now, a lot of people are picking him as a sleeper to make it to New York to win the Heisman. I'm hearing about the 4 new teams in the Big 12. Typically, Oklahoma is one of the biggest talked about teams in Big 12 media days. Right now, they're getting treated like a normal team in the Big 12. You want to know what people are talking about most with Oklahoma? The Bedlam rivalry being gone and what Mike Gundy's saying about it. So nobody right now I'm seeing is picking Oklahoma to win the Big 12. Who have you seen that's
It's different from picking Oklahoma to win the Big 12 and not talking about it?
Not to Oklahoma.
Well, still, you're getting talked about. It's not like no one's talking about Oklahoma.
Nobody's saying they're getting ignored. What I'm saying is you're not getting the typical pub that Oklahoma gets. And some of it is because people still don't believe in Brent Venables. And you know what? I get it.
Yeah,
they struggled last year, but you do need time. My point is, right, if Oklahoma was ever going to sneak under the radar, if that was ever going to happen at any point in the history of college football, this is the year to do it. Because if they go out and go 10-2 and then going into the SEC, it's going to be high hopes, handshakes, and hugs. That's what it's going to be. So this is the only year that Brent Venables can use that tool. That is my main point. But I'm just telling you, the more I look at this schedule, I'm looking at Texas. Again, we talked about Texas a lot the other day, right? They met with Chris Marler from Saturday Down South. At the end of the day, Texas could sneak their way in the college football playoff. Make your jokes, make your laughs, make your giggles. Texas is back, whatever. Every year is different. So I think it's a fascinating storyline. I think they could possibly have the quote-unquote easiest schedule. I like to say the lightest schedule in the Big 12. So it's going to continue to be interesting. Hey, YouTube, thanks for checking us out. Make sure you hit that like button, you hit that subscribe button. We got a ton of content for you, and football season's almost here.